Nestled deep within the misty valleys of a forgotten land, surrounded by towering peaks that seemed to scrape the heavens, stood the Academy of the Courtesan. Cloaked in secrecy and hidden away from the eyes of the world, its location was known to few. The Academy had been built upon ancient foundations, long before the whispers of its existence began to echo through the corridors of power. By day, it appeared as an unassuming convent, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. Tall, ancient trees surrounded it, their gnarled roots intertwining with the earth, creating an inaccessible forest of shadows and mystery. No path led directly to it, no sign marked its entrance, and only those invited knew how to find it. By night, however, the Academy transformed into something else entirely. The humble exterior vanished behind the flickering glow of candles and oil lamps, casting a golden light upon the darkened walls. The halls gleamed with opulence, rich tapestries hanging from the rafters, silk curtains billowing in the night breeze. The scent of exotic perfumes filled the air, mixing with the soft, melodic hum of voices engaged in whispered conversations. The sound of silken slippers against marble floors was the only noise that broke the quiet, a rhythm that seemed to hum with the heartbeat of the Academy itself. The atmosphere was one of luxurious abandon, a world away from the harsh realities outside its gates. The Academy of the Courtesans was not an ordinary school. It was a sanctuary, a refuge for society's orphans, runaways, and castaways, women who had been discarded by a world that found no use for them. These were girls chosen not by virtue of their pedigree or wealth, but by something much more valuable, their beauty, wit, or potential. Each student was handpicked by Madame Olivia, the headmistress, or one of her trusted agents, who scoured the streets, markets, and alleys for those who might possess the raw qualities required to become a courtesan, a master of seduction, diplomacy, and intrigue. But the women trained here were no ordinary courtesans. They were artisans of influence, trained to wield their beauty and intellect like weapons. They were not meant to simply be companions or objects of desire. They were taught to be manipulators, power brokers, and shadowy figures who could bend even the most powerful men to their will. These women were meant to become indispensable players in the grand game of politics and influence, their every movement calculated, their every word a tool for negotiation or persuasion. The Academy's curriculum was one of unparalleled rigor, its methods as unconventional as its purpose. Mornings began with lessons in poise and grace. Dancing, posture, and voice modulation were taught with the precision of an artist honing her craft. Every movement, from the smallest gesture to the most elaborate pirouette, was designed to perfect the girls' control over their own bodies, ensuring they could move through any room with the elegance and authority of queens. Their voices were trained to be soft yet commanding, capable of swaying opinions with just a whisper. Afternoons were devoted to the art of conversation, how to flatter, how to weave compliments into a web of charm, and, when necessary, how to deliver veiled threats hidden beneath layers of politeness. The students were taught that the most powerful tool of all was not brute force, but the ability to speak in a way that left people intrigued, uncertain, and eager to please. They learned how to read the subtlest cues, how to speak in riddles and metaphor, and how to plant seeds of doubt or desire without ever revealing their true intentions. Evenings were reserved for more intellectual pursuits. Under the watchful eyes of Madame Olivia, the girls studied politics, economics, and psychology. They learned how to navigate the murky waters of diplomacy and power, understanding that in the world they were being trained for, knowledge was as valuable as beauty. They were taught how to read people, how to understand their fears, their desires, their weaknesses, and how to use that knowledge to their advantage. To be a courtesan was not only to captivate men, but to control them from within, to make them believe they were in control while they danced to your tune. But behind the silk curtains and gilded halls, a darker truth lay hidden. The academy was not only a school for courtesans, but a covert operation run by a shadowy cabal. The women who graduated from its doors were not simply skilled in the arts of seduction, they were groomed to be weapons in a far larger game. The patrons of the academy, those who funded its operation, had far-reaching ambitions. They sought not only wealth and political favors, but the destabilization of regimes, control over trade routes, and even the ability to topple governments. Each courtesan, trained in the subtle arts of influence, was a pawn in a grander scheme, meant to wield power from the shadows without ever being seen. As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the horizon, the academy's halls fell silent once more. The students, their minds filled with secrets and lessons learned, retired to their rooms, their faces glowing with the promise of what they would become. The academy itself seemed to sleep, but beneath the quiet facade, a much darker reality was always at work, waiting for the moment when one of its pupils would step into the world beyond its gates and become an instrument of power. And for the girls who found their way there, whether by chance or design, the school of courtesans would be both a sanctuary and a prison. It would refine them into something greater than they could have imagined, or break them in ways they could never have foreseen. Little did Hazel know, as she crossed the threshold of this hidden world, that her journey would soon intertwine with the very forces that sought to control it. And the world would never be the same. The rain fell in relentless sheets, soaking through Hazel's threadbare cloak as she trudged through the desolate streets of Lagos. The city, with its cacophony of sounds, was a world away from the tranquil, isolated sanctuary she was about to enter. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decay as she walked, her steps echoing against the stone alleys, the only company the distant murmur of the river and the occasional whistle of the night wind. She had no destination, only the faint hope that something, somewhere, would lift her from this life of poverty, this ceaseless struggle for survival. At just 16, Hazel was a survivor, one of many forgotten souls who roamed the sprawling city with little more than the clothes on their back. She had learned to read the streets like a map, knowing which corners were safest, which vendors could be trusted, and which alleyways to avoid. Her emerald eyes, sharp and discerning, had often been her greatest asset, eyes that missed nothing, that saw opportunities where others saw only danger. It was this gift, along with a quiet resilience that had kept her alive, that had drawn the attention of a mysterious benefactor. The offer had come like a whisper in the night. A note slipped under her door one cold morning, an invitation she could scarcely believe. It was no ordinary offer, but one filled with promises of something greater than anything she had ever known. Hazel had been chosen to leave behind the streets, the hunger, the constant fight for scraps, and enter a world far beyond her imagination. The academy, a place where women were taught to wield power, not through brute force, but through intellect, grace, and influence. But as the carriage rattled over the muddy roads, her excitement was tempered by uncertainty. What awaited her in this academy, in this hidden place? Who were these people who saw potential in her? And most importantly, what would they ask of her in return? The journey took hours, the road winding through dense forests and craggy hills. The further they traveled, the more the landscape seemed to change, as though they were crossing into another realm entirely. The air grew cooler, crisper, and the dense fog that clung to the ground made the world seem half-formed, as if the very earth itself was shrouded in secrecy. By the time the carriage finally slowed to a stop, the moon was high, casting an eerie silver glow over the landscape. Hazel stepped out, her heart pounding in her chest, and gazed up at the imposing structure before her. The Academy of the Courtesan loomed like an ancient fortress, its stone walls wrapped in ivy and shadow. The gates were tall and wrought iron, intricately designed, with a single golden emblem etched into the center, an image of a delicate veil fluttering in the wind. It was beautiful, but also forbidding, like a place meant to be hidden from the world. A tall, slender woman stepped forward as the carriage driver opened the door. She was dressed in a simple but elegant gown of deep purple, her face partially obscured by a veil that hung like a second skin. The woman's presence was commanding, her gaze sharp and calculating. Hazel felt a shiver run down her spine as their eyes met. "Welcome, Hazel," the woman said, her voice smooth and hypnotic, with just a hint of something sharp beneath the surface. "I am Madame Olivia, the headmistress of this academy. You are here because you are special. You have been chosen, not by chance, but by design," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "But make no mistake, this place will either refine you into a diamond or crush you into dust. I hope you will prove to be the former." Her words were both reassuring and unnerving, as though Hazel had just stepped into a world where her fate was already sealed, but she had yet to learn whether it would be a blessing or a curse. Madame Olivia's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before she turned, signaling for Hazel to follow. As they passed through the wrought iron gates, Hazel looked back one last time at the road she had traveled, the world she was leaving behind. The door to her old life was closing, and the new one was just beginning. Inside, the academy was a world apart from everything Hazel had ever known. The entrance hall was grand, with marble floors that gleamed even in the dim light of the candles lining the walls. Tall, arched windows stretched high above, their panes letting in just enough light to create an atmosphere of quiet elegance. The air smelled faintly of incense, and the low hum of distant voices echoed softly through the halls. The building was large, imposing even, and Hazel could feel the weight of history in the walls themselves. Madame Olivia led her down a long corridor, the walls adorned with tapestries of deep gold and purple, each one depicting scenes of courtly elegance and intrigue, women in exquisite gowns standing at the side of kings, whispering secrets into their ears. It was a vision of power, not just beauty. "This is where you will stay," Madame Olivia said, stopping in front of a door at the end of the hall. It was made of dark wood, its surface smooth and polished, with an intricate design etched into the panels. Hazel's name was carved into the door, marking the room as her own. She stepped inside, her heart racing. The room was smaller than she had imagined, but it was richly furnished. An ornate bed covered in silk, a large mirror framed in gold, a small writing desk with parchment and ink. A single candle burned on the table, casting a soft glow over the room's shadows. There was a feeling of restraint here, of something both luxurious and purposeful, as though nothing was wasted, everything had its place. "Rest, for tomorrow begins your training," Madame Olivia said, her voice soft now, but still carrying that underlying authority. "You will learn much here, Hazel. Not just how to be beautiful or charming, but how to control a room, how to make men bend to your will. You will become indispensable to the most powerful men in the world. But beware, this power comes with a price." With that, Madame Olivia turned and left, leaving Hazel alone in her room, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. As Hazel sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of her new life settled over her. She had come from the streets, from nothing, but here, in this place of power and secrecy, she could feel the promise of something greater. Yet, she could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much darker. The night stretched on, and as Hazel lay in the silken sheets, her mind raced with questions about the academy, about Madame Olivia, and about the mysterious benefactor who had chosen her for this path. The answers, she knew, would come in time. But for now, she had only the silence of her room and the soft flicker of the candle to keep her company. And as the clock struck midnight, Hazel knew one thing for certain: her journey had only just begun. The days at the Academy of the Courtesan blurred into one seamless rhythm, each hour marked by meticulous lessons and the unyielding pressure to perform. From dawn till dusk, Hazel found herself lost in a whirlwind of refinement, learning the delicate art of being both seen and unseen. Her transformation had begun. The mornings were the most grueling, beginning long before the sun crept over the horizon. Hazel was woken by the soft toll of a bell, its sound drifting through the stone walls of the academy. The cold, crisp air of the early hour bit at her skin as she made her way to the Academy's grand hall for her first lesson in poise. The instructors were strict, demanding perfection in every step, every gesture, every flicker of emotion that might pass over her face.
Watch out for part 2. Please support my channel by sharing my videos to your families, friends, and loved ones. Kindly subscribe, like, comment on your notification button to get notified when I upload the next video. Thanks.